Breaking news, this mother right here is dead and her 6-year-old is in critical condition. 2 other people were injured and the suspect is dead. All in what investigators are calling a murder-suicide. Good evening and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Julian Grace. Well, this situation played out across 2 counties early this morning. Crime scenes in Wilson and also Nash County. WRAL's Carly Haynes is live in Wilson County at the sheriff's office there. Carly, what more can you tell us?
Enforcement believes that this all got started through a domestic dispute. Now, the Wilson County Sheriff's Office says that 6-year-old is currently undergoing surgery. It's unclear if she's going to live at this point. 2 of the other victims were taken to ECU Health, also undergoing surgery. I want to show you the location where this all got started. This was the scene hours later at a home in Wilson County where deputies say that first shooting happened. At 5 this morning, deputies found a man and a woman shot here. The sheriff's office said the suspect, 32-year-old DaQuan Jones, then drove off with a woman whom he had a relationship with and her 6-year-old child, later dropping off that child at a home in Nash County with a gunshot wound. Listen to this broadcastify radio traffic from Nash County EMS.
Passenger call units reference Lee Road. Sheriff's office on scene advises going to be a 6-year-old female victim with shallow breathing is requesting emergency traffic.
And Jones is accused of then driving to a friend's home on Jamie Road in Nash County, then shooting himself. The woman he was with was found dead in her car. I want to go now to WRAL's Laura Levine, who actually spoke with the friend at that crime scene.
On August 11, 2024, a tragic incident unfolded in Nash County, North Carolina, when 32-year-old DaQuan Marcato Jones fatally shot his girlfriend, 27-year-old Massenberg, their 6-year-old daughter Zoe, and injured 2 friends before taking his own life. This occurred just hours after Jones was released from jail on assault charges related to a prior domestic violence incident involving Massenberg. But what led to this? How could someone so recently imprisoned for violence come home and commit such an unimaginable act? It wasn't just a random act of rage. It was a pattern, one that had been building for years. Jones' violent behavior towards Kira was well documented, yet the system failed to stop him. And after his release, the tragic series of events that followed seemed almost inevitable. In today's video, we'll dive deep into the chilling events of that fateful day, uncover the disturbing details of Jones' history of violence, and take a look at the lives of those affected by his actions. We'll break down how his release from jail led to one of the most devastating acts of domestic violence the community had ever seen. What drives a man to take the lives of those he claims to love? What could have been done to prevent this? And most importantly, why didn't anyone see the warning signs? If you're captivated by real crime stories that peel back the layers of truth, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us as we uncover real cases, raise awareness, and give a voice to the voiceless. Before we dive into today's story, we want to hear from you. Where are you tuning in from? And how do you feel as the story unfolds? Welcome to Deadly Crime Unmasked, the show where we expose the shocking crimes that rip through communities and the chilling secrets lurking behind closed doors. These are real people, real events, real consequences. Don't forget to subscribe and activate notifications. You won't want to miss the gripping story that's coming up. Now let's dive in. Jones' history of domestic violence was well documented. Prior to the murders, he had been involved in multiple violent incidents with Kira Massenberg, his longtime girlfriend. These incidents included physical altercations and aggressive outbursts, which were reported to authorities several times over the course of their relationship. Despite these reports, Jones was often allowed to remain free, allowing the cycle of abuse to continue. The most significant of these altercations occurred in July 2024, when Jones was arrested for assaulting Kira. The assault left Kira with visible injuries, further highlighting Jones' escalating violent tendencies. In response to this assault, Jones was incarcerated in Edgecombe County Detention Center, where he remained until his release just 1 day before the killings. His time in jail was brief, but his violent nature remained unchanged. Jones' criminal history was not limited to domestic violence. While his history of abuse toward Kira was the most notable, he had also been arrested for other offenses. These included charges for assault and battery, as well as property damage. However, despite his criminal record, Jones had managed to avoid significant long-term incarceration. His repeated releases allowed him to continue his violent behavior, which ultimately set the stage for the horrific events in August 2024. Before the assault in July, Jones had also faced charges related to theft and public disturbance. His criminal record painted a picture of a man who, despite multiple brushes with the law, never fully faced the consequences of his actions. This lack of long-term accountability seemed to reinforce his belief that he could act without severe repercussions. This is a common trend seen in cases where individuals with a history of violence continue to escalate their behavior, often due to a lack of meaningful intervention from the justice system. Jones' relationships with his family and friends were marked by a pattern of manipulation and control. While he was known to have moments of charm, those who were close to him knew that beneath the surface, he harbored a deep-seated anger. His relationship with Kira, for instance, was a volatile mix of love and violence. Friends and family of Kira noted that she often tried to leave him, but each time she attempted to escape, Jones would find a way to bring her back, sometimes with promises of change, but always with threats of violence if she resisted. Jones also had relationships with other individuals in the community, including his friends, Devontae Ricks and Mackia Page, who were involved in the tragic events of August 11th. While he may have appeared to be a loyal friend, the underlying issue was that Jones' behavior was often unpredictable. Those close to him knew that his anger could turn violent at any moment, but few took action to confront or stop it. The tragedy that unfolded in Nash County was not just a result of a single violent outburst, but the culmination of years of abuse and a failure to hold Jones accountable for his actions. His history with Kira, his criminal record, and his manipulative relationships all contributed to the eventual explosion of violence that left multiple lives destroyed. DaQuan Marcato led to violent behavior is complex. Domestic violence often stems from a combination of factors, including upbringing, personal history, and social influences. While Jones' specific childhood or early life experiences are not fully known, it's clear that he had a troubled past. Growing up in an environment where aggression was normalized, coupled with a lack of effective intervention, likely contributed to the development of his violent tendencies. Psychologists suggest that individuals like Jones often use violence as a form of control, especially in relationships. This control can be driven by a sense of powerlessness or deep insecurities. For Jones, his repeated cycles of violence may have been attempts to maintain control over Kira and others in his life. However, the lack of long-term consequences allowed these violent tendencies to grow unchecked. Another factor that may have played a role in his behavior was the culture of silence and acceptance around domestic violence. In many communities, there is still a tendency to overlook or excuse violent actions, especially when they occur behind closed doors. Friends and family members may have seen signs of abuse, but often fail to act, either out of fear, ignorance, or a sense of loyalty to the abuser. This created an environment in which Jones was never forced to confront his actions or face the full consequences of his behavior. Looking back, one might wonder if there was anything that could have been done to stop DaQuan Marcato Jones before he committed such a horrific act. The answer is not simple. In many cases of domestic violence, intervention from the legal system and support networks is crucial to preventing escalation. Unfortunately, in Jones' case, the lack of long-term incarceration, combined with repeated cycles of abuse, meant that he was given the opportunity to commit violence again. Had there been more rigorous consequences for his prior offenses, or had Kira and others been provided with more support, the outcome might have been different. But as it stands, the failure to properly address Jones' violent tendencies and hold him accountable allowed his behavior to spiral out of control. This tragic case serves as a stark reminder of the importance of intervention, accountability, and support in preventing domestic violence from escalating to such devastating consequences. Kira Massenberg was a 27-year-old woman who had lived most of her life in the quiet town of Nash County, North Carolina. She had dreams of providing a better life for herself and her young daughter, Zoe, far from the cycle of violence and instability that had marked her relationship with DaQuan Marcato Jones. Kira's upbringing was not detailed in media reports, but like many in similar situations, she was likely raised in an environment where survival often came at the cost of personal well-being. Her relationship with DaQuan Jones began as many do, with promises of love and stability. However, over time, the reality became far different. Jones' temper and abusive behavior were well known, yet Kira, like many victims of domestic violence, found herself trapped. The relationship, once hopeful, descended into a volatile cycle where control, manipulation, and violence replaced love and safety. As a mother, Kira's primary concern was always her daughter Zoe. She dreamed of giving her a life free from the chaos and danger that she herself endured. Kira wanted to be the kind of mother who could shield her daughter from pain, a mother who could offer a future filled with opportunity and happiness. Sadly, Kira's efforts to escape Jones's abuse were repeatedly thwarted. The resources to leave, the strength to make a lasting change, and the support needed to break free were not always available. The tragic irony of Kira's situation was that despite all her efforts, she was caught in the same violent pattern she sought to escape. It wasn't just her life at risk, but Zoe's as well. Kira's desire to protect her daughter led her to make countless attempts to leave Jones, but her fear, coupled with Jones's manipulation and control, made leaving nearly impossible. Zoe Massenberg was only 6 years old when she became another innocent victim in the tragic tale that unfolded on August 11th, 2024. At such a tender age, Zoe's life was just beginning. She had dreams like any child. Dreams of playing outside, going to school, and growing up with the love and support of her family. She never had a chance to experience a life without fear, to know what it felt like to be truly safe. For Zoe, her childhood was marred by the turmoil in her home. She was too young to understand fully what was happening around her, but the effects of her parents' volatile relationship would be felt deeply throughout her short life. Zoe's reality was one where the love and security she deserved were overshadowed by her father's explosive behavior and her mother's struggle to protect her. Tragically, Zoe would never get the opportunity to grow up free from the abuse that surrounded her. Zoe's life was taken from her in an instant, a victim of violence not of her making. While the world she lived in was anything but normal, no child should ever have to face the kind of brutality that Zoe endured. She never stood a chance to escape the violence that claimed her life. The hardest truth to grasp is that, despite her age, Zoe had no power to protect herself, and no one was able to protect her in time. Devontae Ricks and Makia Page were friends of DaQuan Jones and Kira Massenberg. Both Ricks and Page had known Jones for a while, and they were present at the scene on the day the shooting began. At first glance, they may have thought they were just visiting friends, unaware of the deadly danger that awaited them. Friends of domestic violence victims often walk a fine line between being supportive and recognizing when to intervene, and in this case, Ricks and Page found themselves in a position where they were unwittingly caught in a violent outburst that took the lives of Kira and Zoe. Despite their survival, both Ricks and Page now carry the burden of having witnessed the violence firsthand. The psychological and physical toll on them is immeasurable. The question remains whether, had they known the full extent of Jones's violent tendencies, they could have done more to intervene before it was too late. It is easy to ask why friends of an abuser might not step in, but the reality of such relationships is often far more complex. Domestic violence is often hidden from outsiders, and even those close to the abuser may not always realize the danger until it's too late. These are the victims whose lives were changed forever by an act of violence. Kira and Zoe were tragically stolen from a world that could have been their safe haven, while Ricks and Page will carry the scars of that day with them for the rest of their lives. The questions surrounding their deaths force us to reflect on how we can better protect those caught in violent cycles, and whether we can do more to stop tragedies like this before they happen. On the morning of August 11, 2024, a devastating chain of events began to unfold. DaQuan Marcato Jones unleashed a violent rampage that would forever change the lives of his family and friends. At 5 a.m., the peace of the early morning was shattered when gunshots rang out at a home on Weaver Circle in Sharpsburg, North Carolina. This was no random act. The shots were fired by DaQuan Jones, who had come to the residence to confront his girlfriend, Kira Massenberg, and her daughter, Zoe. It's unclear exactly what sparked the violence, but the situation quickly escalated into a terrifying nightmare. Kira and Zoe were the primary victims of the initial gunfire, with both sustaining gunshot wounds. Two of Jones' friends, Devontae Ricks and Makia Page, were also present at the scene and became victims of the violent outburst. Ricks was critically injured, while Page sustained serious injuries, though both managed to survive. As Jones opened fire on his family and friends, the chaos around him escalated, leaving everyone around him scrambling for their lives. The victim's injuries and the horrifying sequence of events. The attack at Weaver Circle was brutal and swift. Kira was struck multiple times, and Zoe, the young child, was also shot in the early moments of the rampage. The severity of their injuries left little hope for survival. Despite the urgency of the situation, no one was able to stop Jones before he fled the scene, leaving behind a scene of terror and devastation. Ricks and Page, though both severely injured, managed to survive the attack. They were able to give critical details to authorities later, shedding light on the horrifying sequence of events and helping investigators piece together what happened. However, Kira and Zoe were not so fortunate. The full extent of their injuries would later be revealed, but by then, the damage had already been done. How Jones fled the scene with Kira and Zoe. After the shooting, Jones didn't stop. He fled the residence in his vehicle, taking Kira and Zoe with him. It's unclear whether Kira was already dead by this point or she was still alive, but she was not able to escape the violence. Jones' movements after the shooting suggest a man determined to do further harm, but what happened next would add another layer of tragedy to the already horrific events. At some point during his flight from the scene, Jones dropped off Zoe at a nearby house. The details of how and why Zoe was dropped off remain unclear, but what's certain is that she was in grave condition from her gunshot wounds. Tragically, Zoe would die the following day from her injuries. A young life, full of promise, snuffed out too soon, caught in the crossfire of violence that should never have escalated this far. How Kira's body was found in Jones' car. As authorities responded to the initial shooting scene and began to search for Jones, they soon located his vehicle at a residence on Jamie Road in Brattleboro, just outside Nash County. Inside the car, they discovered the lifeless body of Kira Massenberg. She had been shot multiple times, and her body had been left in the back seat of the vehicle, abandoned by the very person who was supposed to protect her. It was evident that Jones had no intention of stopping his violent rampage, but what happened next would take the situation from bad to worse. How authorities discovered Jones had died by suicide. Upon approaching the residence on Jamie Road, deputies heard a single gunshot from inside the house. As they entered the property, they discovered the shocking reality. DaQuan Jones had taken his own life. The investigation revealed that Jones had died by suicide before law enforcement could arrest him for the murders of his girlfriend, her daughter, and the injuries he inflicted on his friends. The authorities were left with a trail of death and destruction, but no answers from Jones himself. His suicide prevented any further details from emerging directly from him, leaving the survivors and the community to pick up the pieces of a tragedy that had already been set in motion by his violent actions. Could authorities have prevented this from happening? And if so, how? This leads us to a pressing question. Could authorities have prevented this tragedy? The answer is complex. Jones' prior history of violence was well documented, including an assault on Kira just weeks before the shooting. Despite the charges against him and the violent nature of his past, he was released from jail just hours before the attack. There are many who believe that if Jones had been kept incarcerated for a longer period, this tragedy could have been avoided. Additionally, there were opportunities for intervention that could have saved Kira and Zoe's lives. Domestic violence shelters, legal protections, and other resources were available, but it's clear that these mechanisms failed to protect them. The question remains whether more could have been done to prevent this attack, whether by law enforcement, the legal system, or the community at large. When the horrifying events unfolded, the authorities quickly realized that they were dealing with a complex and tragic case. The Nash County Sheriff's Department, along with local law enforcement agencies, had to act swiftly to piece together the events that led to the deaths and injuries of several individuals. As investigators sifted through the details, the clues came together, revealing a chilling story of a man who, just hours after being released from jail, turned the initial response. At approximately 5 a.m. on August 11th, 2024, deputies received a call about multiple people being shot at a residence on Weaver Circle in Sharpsburg, North Carolina. When they arrived, they found two individuals, Devontae Ricks and Macya Page, injured but still alive. Both were in critical condition and had suffered gunshot wounds. However, Their survival would provide the crucial statements that investigators would rely on as they worked to uncover the details of what had transpired that morning. The deputies immediately began securing the crime scene and collecting evidence. The first task was to figure out how the attack had unfolded and who was responsible. It was clear from the beginning that the shooting had not been a random act of violence, but was linked to a domestic situation. Given the involvement of Kira Massenberg, Jones's girlfriend, and their 6-year-old daughter Zoe. As the investigation progressed, the authorities began gathering critical evidence that would help them understand what had happened. They found spent shell casings at the scene, which indicated that multiple shots had been fired. The deputies also recovered a weapon that was believed to be the one used in the shooting. However, the most telling piece of evidence came from the survivors, Ricks and Page. Both Ricks and Page have been friends of DaQuan Marcato Jones, the man responsible for the violence. Despite being severely injured, they were able to provide vital statements that would help investigators piece together the sequence of events. Ricks told investigators that he had been at the home with Jones, Kira, and Zoe when the shooting began. He described how Jones, who had recently been released from jail, seemed agitated and enraged. Ricks also mentioned that he saw Jones pull out a gun and shoot Kira and Zoe, before turning the weapon on him and Page. Page's statement corroborated Ricks's account, adding more details about Jones's erratic behavior. She described how Jones had been behaving violently for days, and how the tension in the house had been building up in the days leading to the shooting. Page also shared that she and Ricks had tried to intervene, but were overpowered by Jones, who was determined to carry out his attack. The investigators also examined Jones's criminal record and history of violence toward Kira. They learned that Jones had been incarcerated just a day earlier for a domestic violence incident in which he had assaulted Kira. This was an important piece of information, as it revealed that Jones had been released from jail just hours before the shooting, and that his violent tendencies had been a consistent part of his past behavior. After securing the initial crime scene and gathering statements from Ricks and Page, the authorities focused their attention on locating DaQuan Jones. It didn't take long for the investigators to trace him to his vehicle, which had been seen leaving the scene of the crime. They soon discovered that Jones had fled the area with Kira and Zoe. Jones's car was found a short time later, parked near a home in Battleboro, where he had apparently committed suicide. This discovery was crucial. It confirmed that Jones had been on the run after carrying out the killings, and that the situation had escalated rapidly. It was clear that Jones had taken his own life in an attempt to escape the consequences of his actions. Investigators were able to trace the events back to this final moment, which tied together all the clues they had gathered. Ricks and Page played a key role in helping authorities understand the full scope of the events. Their statements provided crucial insight into Jones' behavior and the dynamics in the house before the attack. Without their testimonies, it is likely that investigators would not have been able to put the pieces together as quickly as they did. The survivors' ability to recall specific details, despite their own injuries, helped build a clearer picture of what had happened in the hours leading up to the shooting. The sheriff's department's ability to quickly gather and process evidence also played a significant role in the investigation's success. From collecting forensic evidence at the crime scene to analyzing the weapon and other physical clues, the department acted with precision and focus. The timeline of events became clearer as investigators pieced together statements from the survivors, physical evidence from the scene, and Jones's history of violence. So, what clues did the authorities find that led them to the truth of what happened? It was a combination of survivor testimonies, physical evidence from the crime scene, and Jones's history of violence. The spent shell casings and the weapon recovered from the scene were key pieces of evidence. The survivor statements helped investigators understand the context of the attack and Jones's behavior in the lead-up to the shooting. The investigation also revealed that Jones had been released from jail on assault charges just hours before the killings, which was a critical factor in understanding why he committed the murders. The swift response by the Nash County Sheriff's Department, combined with the valuable input from Ricks and Page, ultimately led to a clear understanding of the tragic events that unfolded on August 11, 2024. The Nash County community, with the tragic deaths of Kira Massenberg and her daughter, Zoe, as well as the severe injuries sustained by two friends, Devontae Ricks and Page. The loss reverberated through the entire region, sparking a wave of grief and anger among residents and authorities alike. Families, friends, and neighbors who knew the victims personally were left to cope with an unfathomable tragedy, while the local community grappled with a painful reality. How could this have been prevented? Authorities also moved quickly to locate DaQuan Marcato Jones, the man responsible for the killings. Despite their efforts, Jones had already fled the scene and, tragically, ended his own life later that same day. In the aftermath, law enforcement officials worked to gather information from surviving victims, friends, and family members to understand the full scope of the events leading to the violence. While the law enforcement response was prompt, the community questioned whether the situation could have been handled differently. The fact that Jones was released from jail just a day before the killings raised concerns about the effectiveness of the legal system in preventing domestic violence-related tragedies. In this case, the system failed to protect Kira and her daughter, leaving the community wondering if there was more that could have been done to stop Jones before it was too late. The Nash County tragedy highlighted just how devastating the consequences of domestic violence can be for children. Zoe's death wasn't just a loss of a child. It was a heartbreaking reminder that domestic violence affects not only the individuals involved, but also innocent bystanders who have no control over their circumstances. The community began to ask, how can we prevent children from being caught in the crossfire of domestic violence? What can be done to ensure that children who are raised in violent homes don't carry the trauma into adulthood? The tragedy raised awareness about the importance of addressing domestic violence early on and the role that communities, schools, and social services play in protecting children from its harmful effects. The community's reaction to the legal process underscored a critical question. How can law enforcement better handle cases of domestic violence to prevent further tragedies? Many argue that victims like Kira deserve better protection from the law. Advocates for domestic violence victims emphasize that law enforcement should take a more proactive approach, ensuring that dangerous individuals remain behind bars for the safety of their victims. The community realized that it is not enough to simply provide legal remedies. There must also be a network of emotional, financial, and psychological support for victims. Advocacy groups play a vital role in offering these services, helping victims of domestic violence navigate their difficult situations and find a way out. The tragic deaths of Kira and Zoe have left a lasting impact on the Nash County community. As we reflect on this case, the focus should be on proactive solutions that give victims a chance to break free from the cycle of violence before it leads to more lives being lost. If this story gripped your heart and left you questioning the truth, don't forget to hit that like button and share with others who need to hear it. For more chilling true crime stories that dive deep into the mysteries behind these tragedies, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest updates, investigations, and thought-provoking discussions. Thank you for being part of this journey with us as we uncover the truth and seek justice. Together, we can make a difference. Stay safe, stay aware, and we'll see you in the next one.